Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss election timing again, as Rishi Sunak is warned against holding the general election next autumn on national and international security grounds. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I've said for some time that the Tories would have been better off going to the polls this year. Not because it was their best chance of winning. They had no chance of winning at any point this year, but because things are only going to get worse for them next year. They're going to lose more seats. But if they weren't going to go to the polls this year, and I could see how they wouldn't want to, because quite a lot of them still think they can win, then next May is the best 2024 time to do so. But Labour's by-election wins this week will surely have increased the chances of the Tories waiting longer for the election, perhaps even the longest, January 2025. Now, being clear, it would be madness to hold the election in January. There are lots of reasons, but let me explain what I think is the main one. The party that goes into an election campaign behind needs to make the most progress in that campaign. I mean, that's obvious, right? So if the Tories are behind, and they will be behind, the last thing they want is an election campaign that runs over Christmas. Not only will it make it even harder for them to find activists willing to get out on the streets, but can you imagine? You're at home, you're having your Christmas break, and knock at the door, you open your door, Christmas week holiday, only to find Greg Hands wanting to talk to you about the benefits of voting Conservative. And this is all to say nothing of the general problems that winter will bring, sharp focus on the cost of living, the NHS winter crisis in full swing, all the rest of it. But that doesn't mean they won't do it. They may end up trapping themselves into doing it. You know, I get the strong impression that many Tory MPs were very surprised by these by-election results. You know, being surprised by election results means that you lose confidence in your party's strategy. Not a great time to be thinking of a general election. So because the Tories have no clear idea about the electoral reality they find themselves in, they could easily keep delaying and delaying in the hope that something magical happens in their poll ratings. You can imagine a scenario where they're looking now and you're going, okay, right, we can't go to the polls like this. So then they get to next March, which is when they'd need to call it for May, and they go, well, it's even worse now. Well, if we weren't going to hold it last autumn, we're certainly not going to hold it now. Have you seen the polls? So then they wait. Oh, well, maybe summer will be better. So they wait for after summer. Then in September, it's even worse. So they go, oh, my goodness, no. No, we'll just wait for inflation to come down. And then inflation comes down. It's like, oh, my God, but actually everything else is even worse. And they end up in December 2024 going, right, we haven't called an election, so now it's going to automatically happen. We're stuck with January 2025. I can see that. And that is possibly, it's why so many of the media, I think, keep thinking that autumn 2024 was the most likely date, even though I think it would be madness. It's because the Tories think they need some good news before the election. And, you know, what do they keep banging on about? Inflation. And inflation is expected to be much lower next autumn. Only the government have been warned against an autumn election next year on security grounds. The concern is that holding the election at the same time as the United States will be holding their major elections means that we're open to massive cyber attacks, that the Five Eyes group could be particularly badly exposed were there to be a major threat emerge. Because, you know, hostile states could spot a window whereby the US government changes but hasn't made its appointments yet of senior officials, and also where a new UK government comes in. Now, we don't change officials with governments, but the ministers will be completely unbriefed on various situations at this point. So it's also been pointed out that it would only make matters worse as well if the US election results were contested. Let us be honest, nobody believes that the aftermath of next year's US elections are going to run smoothly, no matter who wins. So according to a report in the Times, officials on both sides of the Atlantic have said election campaigns at the same time should really be avoided at all costs. Obviously, the USA has fixed dates for their elections, so the onus is on the UK to make use of the flexibility in our system to not put ourselves at heightened risk. However, there is a small flaw in the plan. I'm sure you can see what it is. The Tories very evidently do not give a shit about UK national security, much less international security. We can see this in the reckless way they cultivated relations with people close to Putin's regime, even after Russia was launching attacks on British soil. A political party which would put national security ahead of their own selfish interests would never, ever have made Boris Johnson Prime Minister. If the Tories feel that an election next autumn suits them, I do not know that there is any persuasion possible to get them to change their minds. Certainly not from America, certainly not from our own officials. All I can think of is if the public becomes sensitive to the danger it poses, they might persuade the Tories that it would cost them votes to be seen as risking national security. So if it blows up in public, that could cause them to delay. But if that doesn't happen, then I think this news is probably largely moot. Because you could look at this as making an autumn election unlikely due to the risk, meaning that they will go either with May or leave it until the latest possible date of next January. There was mention in the article of maybe you go for an early autumn election, but that would mean cancelling the party conference. The problem with that is the conference is a big money spinner and the Tories need all the funds they can get. So where does this leave the general election? Well, either they recognise that things are only going to get worse if they leave it beyond next May. They'll have to suffer another bruising set of local and mayoral elections. They'll have to risk channel crossings rising with potentially better weather next year. They'll certainly have to contend with even more voters ending up with much higher mortgage payments and rent payments. They'll have to contend with more news of schools and hospitals collapsing or being at risk of sudden collapse. They'll have to deal with the problem of introducing standards controls on EU imports or delaying them again and risking the consequences of that. But if Tory MPs continue to be surprised by their general unpopularity, and the two by-elections likely in the new year will do nothing for their confidence, then it is possible that they do keep delaying in the hope that a miracle happens. It won't matter if lots of Tory MPs are uncomfortable with the heightened threat to security of holding elections in November. It's not up to Tory MPs, Rishi Sunak decides. But you can't imagine the polling is going to look good even next autumn. So with or without the security risk, you could still see the Tories delaying even then. So the way I see it, next May is clearly their best bet. The new budget will be enforced, but people won't yet have felt the full force of inevitable stealth cuts and tax rises. It means not having to cope with all the problems that summer will bring. It means pressure on the NHS will have eased a little. But if they don't see it that way, if they are not conscious of that, I can actually see the election being delayed until January 2025. It would be madness. But leaving it beyond next May is madness. But if the Tories do have a fixed plan of waiting until inflation hits 3% or something, and then calling the election, then we may well find ourselves with both the UK and US holding incredibly acrimonious elections at the same time as one another, putting us at risk. The one ray of hope I would offer is that it is entirely possible, it doesn't matter what Rishi Sunak's plan, it is entirely possible that the Conservatives cannot hold themselves together for another year or more. It's possible that Sunak could face a leadership challenge this autumn, but even if not, and that would be madness, there are a lot of Tory MPs threatening to vote against the budget next March if it includes overall tax rises. Well, Sunak at the moment is talking about 2 tax cuts for the rich. But that budget next year is going to include an overall rate of tax being higher. And if that happens, will the tax rebels be satisfied with their tax cuts to the rich? Very possibly. But if not, then the government may not have the stability to last beyond next summer. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.